Hey there, so today we're going to talk about 5 things that you can do to improve your resume or CV. So the way that we're going to talk about this in chronological order. So we're going to talk about your contact details, your summary, your skills, your career history, and also your references. But before we jump into all of this, one thing I would always recommend that is whenever you are looking at getting a new opportunity actively, is to tailor your CV to each specific opportunity. However, there's no reason as to why you couldn't have a general CV, and this is a great way to structure that. And then each time you go for a new opportunity, you can tailor it more towards it. So having said that, we're going to talk about the contact details. So naturally, we're in quite a sensitive age when it comes to privacy and information, and I can absolutely understand why some people will be hesitant to put down the contact details. There are definitely ways around this. If you don't want to give too much information, the first thing is talking about your address. So one way of getting around rather than putting down your full address in something that I've always done is I would just put the city that I'm living in at that particular time and the postal address. So what this means is that whoever is looking at my resume CV will just know exactly where it is that I'm living, and they will know rather more roughly where I'm living. Otherwise, that'd be counterproductive. The whole privacy thing. So what would happen is that the recruiter who's reading my CV will know roughly where I'm living and will be able to guesstimate as to how long it'll take to get to the office and whether or not it's worth giving me a call about it. Um, Obviously, once you've had, a contract and signed and everything else, you will need to give your full address. But, at that point, you'll be able to make an educated, decision as to giving that, personal information out. The other thing to have a look at is your number. So this can be a bit of a contentious issue. Personally, I've never had a problem with doing it. I've fortunately haven't had loads of people calling my mobile and trying to sell me things or get dodgy calls or whatever. But if this is something that you're not 100% comfortable with and something I would still recommend to do anyway, even if you are 100% comfortable with it, is setting up a separate email account for your job search. The reason being is so that you're able to keep everything just kind of into one place and it's not being cluttered with other things. You're not getting like spam from Amazon or whatever. And then when you are looking for that information, it's easier to find because we've all been there. Looking for an interview. Going to an interview and looking for their address and just trying to find it in your email. So it'd be a bit of a nightmare. So this would at least be able to kind of keep everything together for you. You can obviously also keep, specific information that you may not necessarily have to hand at any one time within that email archive, like maybe your social security number or your passport details if needs be, or whatever. It's just easier to keep all that together if you find it hard to organize otherwise. The next thing we're going to have a chat about is your summary. So with regard to summary, you do want to keep it clear, sweet and concise, short, sweet and concise. The reason being is that not a lot of time is spent here, but it's still a very important part of the recruitment process. So this is your initial hook. This is what's going to make that fit decision as to whether or not a recruiter wants to move on with your application, or to move on to the next one. So what you want here is your current job title. You also want the industry that you're working in specifically. You're also going to want to have any skills or proficiencies that you have within those roles and responsibilities. This will then start setting up any kind of a initial intrigue with regards to your application, and this will then move on to the next section, which is your skills. So this is quite an important part of your application, and personally speaking, it's one of the first things that I would always look at whenever I was looking at a new CV or resume. So this is best to keep simple, kind of like boxes, columns and paragraphs and stuff like that. You don't want to go crazy with, designs or anything else. Just keep it nice and simple and ordered. Now, having said that, there are some industries that I have worked in where it has been good to, kind of demonstrate any skills that you may have. I was working with some interior designers, so they kind of showcase their Adobe Photoshop skills and InDesign and SketchUp and stuff like that. And that does make sense, but by and large, you want to keep it simple and easy to understand. You don't want to go too crazy. Um, because this is a fantastic opportunity for you to showcase kind of your expertise and the skills that you do have, to get that person who's reading your resume or CV excited and engaged with what it is that you potentially have to offer. You also want to detail what industry knowledge you may have. So you have to understand that whoever is reading your CV or resume may not know anything specifically about what it is that you do. They might have a pretty broad idea, within the industry, but what it is that you specifically do, you will have to educate them on that. One particular example that I had not too long ago is I was reading a CV and it was within the pharmaceutical sector, which I'm quite versed in, but it was within thermal mapping, which is something I had no idea about. It's kind of engineering, very different from kind of chemist and analytical scientists that I would normally have dealt with. But once I saw that it was within thermal mapping, it was very much what I was interested in because I was doing specific search. And because I knew that's what that person was involved with, I made it my priority to get in touch with that person and end up placing them. So it can be quite an important thing to do, because even experienced recruiters can sometimes not know specifically what it is that you do, and you just need to make it as easy for them as possible. The next thing that we're going to have a look at is your career history. So your summary and your skills section should be leading up to this point. So at this point, the recruiter or the HR person or whoever it is that's looking at your CV or resume should be starting to get excited. That they want to find out more. So you've showcased your expertise, you've spoken about the specific things that you've done within your industry, and this is where they get to find out more about that. There's no fixed number with regards how far in depth that you go in with regards to your experience. So what I mean by that is how many years you go back. So I've always said include everything. Just include everything on your CV, but go in depth about 5 years back. Give or take a year or two. If you started a new job 6 years ago, just include that. It makes sense. There's no point cutting it off at the 5 year mark. And likewise, if you finished off a role in the last six months of the first year, the fifth year going back, and it wasn't necessarily connect with your industry. Don't feel like you have to go into massive depth. Just say what you're doing and then include the last 5 years and go in depth there. So just kind of use your common sense with regards to that. So the reason why the summary and the skills section at this point is very important is because it helps structure. It helps gives you structure in writing your CV or resume, but also it gives the person who's reading your CV or resume an idea of what to expect. They're not suddenly confronted with a massive wall of text and going, what is going on here? I have no idea what to look for. They're looking for specific pieces of information. And also, you want to include something that not a lot of people do. Salespeople do it all the time, of course, which is what we do. But you need to brag a little bit. So what I mean by this is when you're applying for a new job or a new opportunity or project or whatever, what you need to do is make sure that you include all of your notable achievements. So everybody includes, what their role is, what their responsibility is, but they don't necessarily include their achievement. So the reason why this is important is because people are always hired for one of three reasons. So reason number one is that you're there to make money. Reason number two is that you're there to save money, and reason number three is that you are there to change or improve a process. So most people usually are hired for one of the three specific reasons, and then they kind of touch on the other two. Um, But what you want to do is when you're writing about your roles and responsibilities, have another little section below that, showcasing any notable achievements and how you quantify them as notable achievements. So one of the things that I used to always work with was what's called Lean Six Sigma, which is basically streamlining a process within a manufacturing environment. So the reason why this is quite important was it helped cut cost. So whenever I was working with candidates, who mentioned that they had these accreditation, I would then, go into detail. What is it that you did? What projects were you working on? How did you do this? How did you do that? And by really kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it, I was able to showcase that to clients, show them, say, right, this candidate has done X, Y, and Z, and because they're able to do that, A, B, and C happened. And having showcased that to the client, that drastically improved the chances of them getting a call. It got to the point where it was having nearly 99% success rate whenever I did that. Very rarely it wouldn't result in a callback. So it's an incredibly powerful tool, and I would highly recommend for you to do it. The last section we're going to have a chat about is your references. So I touched on this when we were talking about contact details, and that is, obviously we're in the age of everybody can get in touch with everybody, so everybody values their privacy. Um, so when it comes to references, in the past it was fairly accepted to just to stick down your references because it help expedite the whole process. But now that is just a no-no. You absolutely do not want to do that. The reason being, in case you were unaware, is because recruiters will just call your references, constantly. And if your CV is up online, which it very may well be if you're going through like CV portals, job boards or anything, people will just be calling your references all the time, and your name will be associated with that annoyance. If you have 10 15 calls coming through a day or a week or whatever, and they're calling about you even though you never gave them permission to get in contact with your references. So your references will obviously get irritated by this, which is a danger in of itself, because they may not necessarily give you a positive reference. But also they may just refuse point blank to give you a reference, which doesn't reflect well on you. If you aren't able to provide a specific reference for whatever reason, an employer may retract an offer on that basis alone. So just always stick at the bottom, references upon request. And if you ever have a recruiter who is asking specifically for references, for whatever reason, whether it's a contract role where they will have to ask references up front or because that's part of the process, just get in touch with your reference and say, hey, this recruiter got in touch with you at such and such a time. So you're setting that expectation for them. It'll also help put off people. It'll also help put off people just calling for the sake of it if they're, calling about a fake job, which does happen, unfortunately. Because if the reference is expecting the call, it's a lot harder to manipulate that into what's called a business development call. So it'll just help kind of put more control over who gets in contact with your references. So those are the five main reasons as to why, or the five main tips, I suppose, as to improving your CV. They're fairly simple. I would always go through those for all CVs, regardless of how specific or broad your CV is. So that is it for today. So feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have anything that you'd like for me to touch on specifically, I'm more than happy to have a look at it. I'm always open to suggestions. I've also got a recruiter's blog that goes into detail with this topic in a lot more, and gives out specific examples and everything else at www.recruitersreport.com. Other than that, speak soon and goodbye.